Welcome into this 14th installment of Razor Recap, your go-to destination for the latest updates on Arkansas baseball and softball action. Join us as we break down the season. We'll highlight some performances and discuss kind of overall what happened with the season for Arkansas baseball. Can't forget, Razor Recap is brought to you by Scarlet Letter, Arkansas's very own handcrafted spiked seltzer. Check them out today if you're in Northwest Arkansas. You can also check out the Core Brewery Tap Room, where you can get Scarlet Letter on tap in all their various flavors, as well as some of their new releases coming soon. So go check them out today. And no specific agenda for the show today is, Arkansas season unfortunately came to an end yesterday as they played in the elimination game in the Fayetteville Regional. Second year in a row, Arkansas gets beat out in its own regional, and you kind of take a look at it, what went wrong with this team. And I think the big glaring issue that a lot of people want to talk about, harp on, it was Arkansas's hitting. And I agree, we had in that game that we lost against SEMO, we had bases loaded twice and didn't score a single run either time. And in a situation where it's lose or win or go home, you can't have that. You've got to have some time hitting, push some runs across. And I think you could tell the frustration in Dave's press conference after the game where, he kind of knew that had happened. Your quick thoughts on the game?
Well, yeah, that game was rough. It really kind of highlighted the fact that we really struggled at playing small ball all year. There was a couple of instances that SEMO did against us where they had back-to-back bunts that turned into a squeeze play on one of them, if I recall correctly, to score a run. It's like, man, that looks weird. We ain't done that all year, And granted, that maybe not be the normal SEC style of ball, but I think that was one thing that Dave definitely talked about after the fact was, I didn't really have the roster to try to play small ball in scenarios where we needed just one, maybe two runs. We were trying to score runs in bunches with getting a couple walks and then maybe hitting a home run or, even bouncing some singles and doubles together. But it seemed like those scenarios where you're trying to like manufacture a run, whether it be moving runners up with bunts or even some of those squeeze play scenarios where you got some speed at third base and you do a bunt there to try to sneak a runner home, if you will. The roster wasn't necessarily built for that. And certain games where things were tight and just didn't seem like we were hitting the ball well all throughout the year, honestly, not even just this regional, all throughout the year. Those were the games where that was kind of a glaring problem. We struggled against the shift more than we ever should have, and then we really struggled in small ball scenarios.
Yeah, it's one of those things that throughout the year, our pitching carried us all season. We were just able to go out and out pitch other teams. And, if we were lucky to get, one or two home runs, have a guy or two on base. And, the number of games we won this year that were 3-2, 4-2, 4-3, those low scoring games, 1-run games that most other teams, if you didn't have as good of a pitching staff as Arkansas did, you would have lost those. And I think we kind of just, in the situation when we got knocked into that loser bracket, that really put a hurt on our bullpen, especially with Brady Tigert being out. Yes, he hadn't been great lately towards the end of the season, but that's another arm that you can get a few innings out of. And when you look at it, I was afraid if something like this would happen, is that we would come into a regional or come up in a matchup where we'd have to try to hit our way out of it, and we couldn't. And that's what happened. You saw us try to make a push late in the Kansas State game on Saturday night where we got within one run and then just couldn't push the other one through. And then same thing, we got within three right there in the end of the game. Parker Rowland came in, hit that 2-run blast that, put it 6-3. But other than that, like Seth said, you can't. And Seth, just mentioned that, and Dave even said in his press conference after the game, you can't just have 8 guys that are going to go up there and hit home runs and expect to win a lot of ball games. Yes, that's great to have some guys that can come out there and just put it over the wall when you need to, but you've got to be able to play that small ball type of ball where you can hit doubles, singles, get guys on base, steal some bases, put down the sack bunts, things like that. And like Seth said earlier, this team wasn't necessarily built for that. And I think you saw, once we kind of used up a lot of arms, and Dave even said that in the press conference, they noticed that the arms are just starting to get tired. And I think that didn't help against a SEMO team that had been hitting the ball well all year.
Yeah, that's true. And you got to take it back to the Kansas State game. You know, I can't help but think that, you pull Hagan 1 inning earlier. That's probably a win. It realistically. I don't know that for sure. It's tough to say, and you can what if yourself into oblivion. But but that what it comes down to is Hagan is the guy that you trust the most, and he got into a little bit of a pickle there. I think it was in the 5th inning, and you want to let him work his way out of it, especially at the point where he'd only given up a run or two, had a couple walk issues, and then boom, there goes the 3-run bomb, and that really just it put it just almost a little bit out of reach. And so, yeah, if you pull him an inning earlier, maybe things are different. But at the same time, like I said, that's the guy you trust the most. He's had some of the best outing for us, especially he's gotten his way out of multiple sticky situations without getting flustered. And so if there's anybody you want out there when there's 2 or 3 runners on base, it's Hagan Smith. So I don't necessarily question that decision. A lot of people were. They thought he had lost his command, and maybe. Um, but traditionally, you were getting, 90 to 100 pitches out of him before he started to have any type of command issues, and he wasn't quite at that point yet. So I think that alone right there was a little bit of a fluke thing that ended up kind of costing us that game and just kind of exacerbated the fact that, hey, all these pitchers' arms are starting to wear out maybe a little bit. It's late in the year. There's a couple of these guys that we really, had to get more out of than maybe we wanted to as of late, especially since Mason Molina didn't make it very long in game 1. I think that also kind of compounded the fact that, they were wanting Hagan to go as long as possible in game 2. That was in the back of their minds. So I think there was a combination of things that really hurt us just in pitching alone, in this weekend that a lot of things kind of combined together to make it a little bit tough. And just genuinely, 1 inning can make you lose or win a game. You can be on the receiving end of that where you're the one that scores 5 or 6 runs in 1 inning due to some pitching errors and somebody struggles, walks a lot of guys, and then a timely home run. We've done that all year long on our end as well. Multiple games that we've won that we probably shouldn't have just due to 1 or 2 innings. So that's the game of baseball, and it really is unfortunate when when the timing happens like this. It seems like it's kind of done it back-to-back years on us, which is a little bit unfortunate. The similarities between these 2 regionals was kind of eerie, with a purple team coming in that was really hot, swinging the bats well, and got lucky in a few games, in my opinion, but it seems like the ball bounced their way really, really well kind of the whole weekend. It felt that the exact same way against TCU. But anyways, there's a lot of things you can point at that were problems, whether it be pitching, offense, things of that nature. But you do got to give the kids credit. They played hard in every game that they were in. Even when we did get behind, they were trying to chip away at every deficit, find ways to get guys on, bring them home. I thought Peyton Holt had a phenomenal weekend. I mean, probably the best out of all of our players just from all 3 games played. McLaughlin had a really good game 1. Thought he did well. There's some standout performances kind of in there. But all in all, you didn't have the batting that we had talked about kind of in the preview show where you needed, 6, 7 guys really hitting the ball well at the same time. Saw some struggles out of Aloy, saw some struggles out of Stovall at times. They had, a couple decent at bats, but, it seemed like there was a lot of 1-for-4s, 0-3 situations where, okay, I mean, he hadn't hit the ball all day. He's got to be due one, and we've got an opportunity here to score some runs with bases loaded, and then little dink pop up to second base or something. It was just like, man, it's the timely hitting just didn't feel like it was there from the guys that needed to be from. So anyway, I'm going on a rant on a lot of the problems that hurt us this weekend, but all in all, you do got to give credit to a lot of the teams that were in our regional. I thought we pulled a good regional, but you got to give a lot of credit to SEMO and Kansas State, considering they were the 3 and 4 seeds, how well they were able to play coming in, in a hostile environment. They came out, and both teams honestly played some great baseball. And then Kansas State obviously ended up getting the win because they made it through that winners bracket and didn't have to throw as many guys. I think that ended up being SEMO's demise. But anyways, it was a fun regional. It's just tough when you're not the ones coming out on top in it.
Yeah, that's true. And I want to go back to what you were talking about just a minute ago with Hagan Smith. A lot of people are, looking back at it, being like, well, Dave should have pulled him sooner, and that those type of things. But you've got to look at it. Yes, he got around that, 90-ish pitch mark. But he got pulled after 5. Usually he's a guy that goes 6
Sometimes
and
7.
sometimes 7. And even Dave said, they took some innings away from him during the season just so he could go longer. So I don't necessarily think it's a fair assessment to say, oh, he should have pulled him sooner, because he was just rolling with what we're used to getting out of him, 6 to 7 innings. Yes, his pitch count got a little high in that 5th inning, and he's the guy that you want to trust to work around a tough spot. Like you said, he had a few times during the year. Like, your ace is the guy that you want to let, work out of a jam and see if he can get you there. And unfortunately, they did have that 3-run blast that kind of gave them a little bit of the momentum. But I think when you look at it, yeah, like you said, hindsight's 2020. You can look at it then and be like, well, if you would have pulled him a pitch or two earlier before that, maybe that would have happened, and then we won that game, yada yada, whatever, But I think at the end of the day, like you said, if we could have, I would say more or less, if we could have hit better, that wouldn't have mattered, because we still put it within a 1-run game. And I think that's the thing that I noticed. I went out to the game on Sunday, and some of the things that I really looked at was, we'd have guys that they'd get something straight down the pipe and not even swing at it, and then next pitch it'd be low, they'd be trying to golf at it, or it'd be outside and they'd be trying to reach. And you've got to wonder, that kind of segues us into our next kind of conversation that a lot of people are talking about is, I'm not one of those that want to call for somebody to get fired. But it's been a frustrating past couple seasons with how our hitting's been and our approach. And I don't necessarily think it's necessarily, oh, you got to get rid of Nate Thompson, but I think it's something that maybe he needs to change his approach if he wants to continue to have success. And an interesting stat to me that's truly unacceptable is, you look at that I saw, I believe it was yesterday. You take just the postseason over the past 7 years when Nate Thompson's been the hitting coach for Arkansas. Arkansas's batting average just in postseason alone over the past 7 years is 176. You can't expect to win many postseason games when your batting average is under 200.
Yeah, that's a staggering stat. I saw that same thing. I think you and I even talked about it. I mean, it's just it's kind of strange, and doesn't even, like, the math don't math, because you play all these SEC teams all year long. You've got at least a handful of guys that were batting over 300, even in this year. And this was a down year, and as far as our batting average goes across the board. And so you get into postseason, and I don't know if just the mentality gets tight or what it is, but it seems like our lineups just struggle. You'll have a handful of guys that hit well, but it's like the whole lineup just can't. It's the weirdest thing. And there's a handful of guys, a Ty Wilmsmeyer, for example. You're not maybe expecting a ton. I thought he actually had a great weekend. Was finding ways to get on base even when it wasn't with hits and things. He was drawing his walks better. I thought he got a lot more patient and was more selective at the plate, and he didn't have as many strikeouts as we'd seen all year long. So that's the approach that you want, But at the same time, you had a lot of guys like Stovall who'd been, red hot. And then you get into regionals, and he didn't look the same. And I'm not blaming that on him necessarily. That's how baseball is. Sometimes you face pitchers that you just don't see the ball out of their hand, or I think velocity has a little bit to do with it. You're facing these guys that are throwing 96 to 98 on their heaters, and then change-ups are 80s, and anywhere after that, it kind of depends on some of the breaking balls, depending on what pitchers are throwing what. But that's what you're used to seeing all year long. And then you start going up some guys that are throwing 65 mile an hour or something kind of crazy. And yeah, it maybe gets in your mind a little bit, but maybe we need to start having a little bit more BP where they're throwing 65 mile an hour curveballs at you over and over and over. So you're a little bit more used to seeing that. So to your point, I'm not really calling for anybody's job either. I do have my frustrations with Nate Thompson. I even have my frustrations with Nate Thompson as a third base coach. There's been a couple of times where I was like, dude, you send a guy, force the throw from the outfield, and just see, especially on those kind of in-between plays. There's certain ones where, yeah, you don't want to send a guy where it's going to be fairly obvious the cutoff man is going to be able to gun him down, especially with some of the competition level that we face. But every once in a while, dude, he's throwing up the brakes on some guys around in third that even have good speed. Wilmsmeyer this weekend was a prime example that I thought he should have sent home. I can't remember what game it was in, but holds him up, get the bases loaded, and then it ends up nobody scoring. And it was just like, man, that one run, it might not have won the game, but it sure would have helped us inch a little closer and get that much more momentum. So sometimes you get thrown out at home. Sometimes you force errors and you end up scoring more than one maybe on that play. So sometimes I feel like we're a little bit too safe.
I was about to say, you got to be willing to take that chance.
Yeah. And
especially in tight game situations where, you don't have much time left. I mean, if you don't risk it, you lose anyway.
Sometimes you risk it and win. And I'm not sure if we take enough gambles. And I know we want to be conservative and play smart and be selective when we do those things, especially stealing bases and things like that. But, I mean, those are the plays that do make or break ball games, though. That's how you force the ball to bounce your way, if you will, or steal some runs that end up being crucial. And there's other ways to win games too, but some of those scenarios where you're trying to force the other team to make a play or not, those can be deciding factors in games. And I just felt like we didn't put enough pressure on teams at times, if you will. So anyways, that's neither here nor there. But when it comes down to actually the hitting side of things and the approach that we have, that was one of my big frustrations. You hit the nail on the head. We watched 2 straight beautiful fastballs go by. Or, maybe not. Maybe you see one good one, see a couple bad ones, see a good breaking ball, and then swing at some junk because you just watched 4 pitches with a couple of them being good that you probably should have offered it. I understand we're trying to be patient. We're trying to get our base runners, especially drawing walks like your Ben McLaughlin or whoever. You're trying to get on base. But at the same time, you look at one of the guys that had the best batting average for us was traditionally one of the ones that swung at more of those first pitches was Peyton Holt. Some of those numbers kind of jive together. He was traditionally the one person that swung at first or second pitches more often than anybody else. Sometimes it resulted in fly outs or ground outs or whatever. But more often than not, that's sometimes the best pitch you're going to see in an at-bat is that first one. And if you guess right and it's a fastball, or if you guess right and it's a changeup or whatever, and you square that thing up, that's how you build momentum, get base runners on. And then if there's guys on the bases, that's how you bring them home. And there was a couple instances like you hit on where we had bases loaded. We watched 2 really good balls go by, maybe foul a few off and then chase a jump pitch. And it was like, we didn't even swing at the best pitch that you just saw in that at bat. Probably didn't even swing at the best 2 pitches you just saw at that at bat. And so that's got to change. I don't know how you get that to change, what the approach needs to be, whether it's with more bunts, with more, choke up situations, whether you're letting guys swing away for the fences. That's another thing that probably needs to be discussed is the approach from an actual batting standpoint. One person that you saw choking up and having a little bit more success just keeping the barrel in the zone was Hudson White. Changed a few things late in the year. He started hitting the ball better. Where was that for everybody else? Is my question. Because, you still had guys swinging out of their shoes on 0-2 pitches for no reason. But anyway, there's a lot of questions that could be addressed from the hitting standpoint, whether it's new coaching needs to be involved or just a different approach and different players to provide part of that different approach. I can see a lot of need for change in some departments all around the board there, whether it's coaching mentality changes, coaching changes altogether, player changes, practice changes, the way you're taking practice, whether it's, off of machines, live arms, what you're having the guys that are pitching to your batters throw. You're gearing up for SEC play because that's more often, that's the most games you play is SEC games, but maybe you got to, have a little bit more at bats where you're simulating, the lower tier opponents, if you will. And I know that's what some of the non-conference games are through midweeks, but you think we haven't had a midweek game in a month to see that, kind of that speed style of pitching, if you will. And there is a difference. And so, maybe that actually come back to bite you. So I don't know. There's a lot of questions and not a whole lot of answers yet. But I do trust Dave Van Horn to find those answers. He already knows the problems way more than we do. He's been around it and seen it all year long. He's identified a lot of that. He spoke about a lot of it in his press conference. We've already hit on that a good bit. So I am curious to see, who we lose. Obviously, we're going to lose several guys that are out of eligibility. Who we lose in the transfer portal, who, tries to go to the draft maybe a year early, like a Stovall, for example. I think he's got eligibility left, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's I think he's only a junior.
I think he's only a junior, but he's most likely going to go, is my understanding. So players like that. It's going to be an interesting offseason because I think there needs to be more moves this year than there even was last year. Granted, last year, you had a decent amount of exodus for various reasons. You had to fill some spots like your shortstop because John Bolton was out of eligibility and things like that. So this year, Dave really hit the nail on the head in that press conference where, our outfield, especially when Diggs was struggling, it seemed like the way that they were performing at the plate, they ended up being kind of more your 7, 8, 9 guys, which if you have a good ball club, normally you've at least got one or two of those outfielders out there that they're on your team because they hit well and they just play the outfield because they have to have a place to play. And, maybe they're good outfielders too. You think back to like Heston Kjerstad, for example, or even Kendall Diggs, really. He wasn't the best outfielder at first, turned into a great one. But Kjerstad was not out there for his defense. You probably had some better outfielders from a defensive perspective on that team with Kjerstad. But he was a day one starter. He was going to be in that lineup, in that number 3, number 4 hole all year long. Made some good plays in the outfield, don't get me wrong, but he was there for his bat. And you've got to go get you a couple of those guys and then you got to have a couple more guys that do have some speed on the base paths, and have maybe a little bit more well-rounded team.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I feel like we were a little bit too one-dimensional.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things. You even a perfect example this year is a guy that normally played the infield. Look at Peyton Holt. He was a guy that normally second, third baseman, sometimes shortstop, but transitioned to a really great outfielder. Made some spectacular catches towards the end of the season, and you kind of makes you wonder why wasn't he getting more playing time earlier in the year? But he is a guy that he wanted that playing time, so he adapted himself to what got him that playing time. And if that was playing in the outfield, a newer position to him, his bat was able to be a key contributor. And then you saw sometimes in late game situations, you sub Wilmsmeyer in for defensive ability if, we had the lead or something. But, I agree with what you're saying. And, if you out there have watched that Dave Van Horn press conference, he even mentioned it. He said, we need more speed out there. He said, and I said earlier, he was like, we can't just have 8 guys that are going to go up there and hit home runs. You need guys with speed out there that can hit some doubles, singles, run the bases. And I think that's, something that we missed over the past couple of years. We didn't steal as many bases. Look at the Kentucky team. Speedy guys steal the bases. Even that Kansas State team, speedy guys that would steal the bases. And Van Horn made the comment, too, of the draft hurt us. There were some guys that had great speed, great hitting ability that we didn't get because they decided to stay and work their way up through the pro system. But, you're going to have that. And every year you're going to have some guys that are here that aren't expected to be like, the 2 that come to mind is Geckel and Helfrich. 2 guys that Dave said he was surprised that actually made it to campus after being drafted and just not really what they're expecting, I guess. And, that's probably going to happen again this year. Arkansas's got, as of right now, the number 2 signing class, but, you've got the draft in a little over a month, and that's going to change a lot of things. I mean, you're probably going to get most of those kids, but you're going to lose 1 or 2, maybe even 3 or 4 they're going to get drafted just high enough and get offered just a big enough paycheck where they're like, well, let me go ahead and go instead of going to college.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know if he was necessarily getting at the need for more NIL funding in a roundabout way. I think there might have been some undertones of that for sure. And there definitely is some need for that in the fact that you can't give college players full ride scholarships, or at least you weren't used to. I'm not sure if that's changed recently. I know there's been some swirling on like the way baseball is funded from a scholarship standpoint, but I still don't think there's any,
I think baseball utilizes a lot of partial scholarships.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like there are no full rides for baseball, at least currently, is my understanding of it. And so more often than not, you have to mesh that partial with maybe an academic scholarship and whatever else you can kind of drum together, Pell Grants and all those things, to help kids be in school for as little out of their pocket as possible. Especially, in a field of baseball where nowadays NIL, they're not getting the $2-3 million deals, at least yet. It's not as big of a revenue sport as basketball and football, where a lot of those big money deals are happening. But I
I was
think
about to say, you mentioned that Arkansas is one of those rare programs where baseball usually when you're talking about tier of revenue, it usually goes football, baseball, football, basketball, baseball, with football bringing in the money, basketball breaking even, getting maybe a little bit, and then baseball is usually the one that loses money for most schools. Arkansas, I feel like, is an outlier there. Is our baseball is good enough every year for the most part all season. The stands are packed, and they probably, I wouldn't be shocked if we're right up there with basketball where we're close to, equaling out or even, on the verge of potentially turning profits there.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a very fair assessment. I don't know what the numbers are specifically. It's got to be close, though. There's no way you have that level of fan involvement and the ticket prices the way they are and things like that for them not to at least be close to breaking even or potentially making a few bucks. But at the same time, it isn't football. We got to be realistic there. However, I think Van Horn made a little bit of a case for there to be at least some level of NIL funding that is specific for baseball. And I think that's kind of the next topic is really, where does the next couple of years in college baseball look? What's the outlook? What's the landscape going to be like over the next few years, especially with some other schools kind of in the same boat that we are? Maybe not necessarily winning as much as they think they should, as much as they're traditionally used to. Vanderbilt comes to mind, So it's teams like that traditionally have, perennially good baseball programs that have a lot of fan support, a lot of fan backing. Are they able to drum up some NIL funds to maybe keep some of these players out of the draft? It's got to be a lot of money. That's the bad thing is you're talking, millions of dollars here. And is that something that you can even drum up? I mean, I know there's been some new legislation change where schools themselves are actually allowed to pay the players. It doesn't have to come from like a NIL collective donation, group fund or whatever you want to call it, or from sponsorships from businesses or things. So does that change, the way that we do things? I think there's a lot of variables out there in play right now that Van Horn kind of opened the doors to, if you will, on, okay, there was a couple of guys out there that could have made this team even better as freshmen that we could have locked down for the next couple of years potentially and had like a really good ball club for the next couple of years. But I lost them to the draft due to financials. So Arkansas State, he's addressing everybody, whether it's people at the university, the fans, whatever, what are we going to do about it? And he didn't say that verbatim at all, but there's definitely undertones there that I think some things need to start creeping that direction. I don't know if there's got to be a drastic change where we've got to all of a sudden have kind of like the basketball program, $7 million to work with or something to flip the script on the way things are going. Cause I still think Arkansas is a destination for college baseball players to go to. There's too many good facilities, too many good coaches, too much history, too many opportunities after baseball from a pro or others' perspectives. I mean, there's so many guys that have come out of Arkansas as players that are coaches elsewhere. We played one of them in Trevor Ezell. And actually, Andy Sawyer, that was his name, I believe.
Yeah.
Used to play for Van Horn. I mean, the connections between Van Horn, Arkansas, and then the tree that comes off of that is just unreal. So the opportunities really are there if you come here. And there's other schools similar, but I mean, it's for real at Arkansas. So there's got to be some discussions from the high ups, the 100-year checks, if you will, and others on, what do we do to get this corrected? It's not like we're not producing on the field like we should. We're close. We're there. Let's be real. If the ball bounces a couple different ways this weekend, even without as good a hitting as we needed, we easily could have made it out of this regionals. That game 2 loss to Kansas State, you had one bad inning, literally one bad inning. If that inning was just cut in half, you win that game. So I mean, it's crazy how little things like that can make or break a season, but they do. And so you sit here and microanalyze every single thing that goes into that, and you try to correct everything. And maybe everybody, especially as fans, read a little bit too much into that and think drastic measures need taken when maybe they don't. Maybe it's 2-3 different players, and you would have won these games. I don't know. But anyway, it's fun to sit here and have a nice little discourse on, what you could have done, should have done, what you need to do, what you can do, what you can't do that you wish you could do. I mean, there's a lot of fun conversations that are being had right now, that are going to be had as this offseason progresses. And to your point, as we see kind of how this upcoming recruiting class either makes it on campus or not, and what are the reasons that they don't. That's going to be a big talking point, I think, for a lot of people, just from the financial side of things, on who actually makes it to campus and who doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's one of those things too, like you mentioned it, with the increase and the kind of the change of pace, like maybe you just mentioned that 7 million from that's going to basketball, maybe that jump starts, I've already heard that's kind of made some increase on people wanting to do more for football, get that notoriety, if you will. Not that necessarily that's not what it's all about, but these companies like, John Tyson with Cal, I mean, him putting up money to help.
They got a lot of publicity from it, and everybody else wants a piece of that.
And so, shift that over to baseball a little bit, and, who knows what just a little bit can change. And Dave hinted on another thing too, that this was the second straight season that he's had to replace the entire outfield. Last year we lost Jace Borfin, Davian Yosenberger, and Jared Wagner. So, and you have a whole nother starting 3 this year, or not even starting 3, starting 5 to 6, because you rotated so many guys through trying to find the lineup you like. And I think that's where I think a lot of people have said, well, the game's passed Dave by. He's not able to compete with the thing today, and but he's working that transfer portal. He's going out there and getting guys. Just look at last year, Tavian Yosenberger. This year, Hudson White, Mason Molina, Jared Wagner last year, Borfin, he was a transfer, came in from Oklahoma. He's using the transfer portal. He's not just relying on some of these talented freshmen, even though, we're getting a ton of those in. But I think Dave knows what he's doing. And, I'm not going to lose trust in the guy that he just put up a 30-win season at home. And, yeah, it sucks that we lost out of regionals, but at the end of the day, he's one of the best coaches in college baseball. And if you disagree, it makes me question if you really know baseball. Yes, he hasn't got that national title, but that's really hard to come about. Yes, we were close in 2018. Yes, it sucks that on a simple play kind of cost us that. But at the end of the day, how many SEC championships has the man won? Conference championships. How many just college World Series and Omaha appearances he's made. That's a tough thing to do. And yeah, winning a national title is extremely tough. And so at the end of the day, I think let Dave go to work. He even said in his press conference, he's going to get ready, start working on next season. And I think that's going to come into, you really want to start finding out who's leaving, who's going to be gone, who's coming back. I mean, if you just look through our roster right now, you've got really you're losing your entire outfield again for the most part. Ty Wilmsmeyer, grad transfer. You've got Kendall Diggs. He's a junior. Who knows if he's going to come back or not? He didn't have the greatest of seasons, and that probably didn't help his draft stock. But then you think Peyton Holt, he's out of eligibility.
That one hurts too, man.
Yeah. Talk about a spark plug that came in and just gave you energy every single at bat, every play. And then you look inward. You're losing your entire infield except for Vahiva Loy. Ben McLaughlin, he's a senior. You've got Peyton Stovall that you just talked about, probably going in the draft. Jared Sprague-Lott, grad transfer that came in. So you're going to have to replace those guys, or you've got some guys on your roster that redshirted and are ready to go. And then, Hudson White, does he go or does he come back? Did he have a good enough year? Does he feel like he gets the offer he wants? You've got Ryder Helfrich, extremely talented catcher that makes some improvements at the plate. It has a chance to be really good over the next couple of years. And so, you look at that, makes you really start looking at what you've got on your roster, thinking about next year, who you've got that you can possibly run out there. Nolan Souza, had a great freshman year, up and down, typical freshman year, but, really stepped up in some moments. He's a guy that throw him out there at third, throw him out there at second potentially. He's worked at several different positions throughout the season. Jason Jones, another guy that seems to be on that verge of one game he comes out there and seems like he wants to break out, is a powerful hitter, very loud outs, a guy that you could put in the left. Another guy that you're losing, Ross Lovich, he's a senior. I think a guy that redshirted this year that we saw some last year, not a ton this year, Reese Robinette played some first base last year, has a big bat, has the chance, maybe he comes back and, takes that first base job. And then you got to look at what you've got coming in as well. So, and Dave's going to go out and get after a few transfers. I saw today a big name that Dave might go after, where I got a couple of guys from there already, is Texas Tech's first baseman entered the portal today, and he had a solid year over at first. Why not go out there and get you an experienced first baseman, bring a mix of experience with a lot of talent coming in? And then you look at your pitching. Obviously you're losing Hagan. He's going to easily be a top 10 pick. Brady Tiger most likely comes back. He didn't have.
I could see him transferring. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that's an option too. My thought was if he comes back, you kind of maybe see if you can talk him into going back to one of those reliever type roles. I think he excelled more in that than a starting type of role. Mason Molina, does he come back? Did he have a good enough year? And does he get the offer he wants, or does he come back? And then you've got a lot of young talent. Gage Wood gave us some great innings, especially towards the end of the year when he got some starts. He's probably going to be a guy that you roll out there on one of your weekend starters next year. Gabe Geckel, a guy that you can't say enough about, that had an outstanding freshman year, that he's probably a weekend starter next year.
And yeah, he's the future of the pitching staff as far as aces go, I think. He's the next Hagan Smith. Potential. I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to be that kind of level, but yeah, that's going to be like your big guy coming out of the bullpen or as your starter next year that everybody's going to have circled. There's some other good ones, don't get me wrong, but like that one, whoo.
I was about to say, yeah, some other guys that you look at that could contribute next year. Colin Fisher, fantastic in midweek starts this year. Hunter Dietz, a guy that you didn't get to see much of this year due to some injury issues, but he was highly raved about in fall camp. And, we just get to see him. There's several guys on this roster that you didn't get to see this year just because, they're the future of the bullpen, so you're not going to burn a red shirt. And then you're going to bring in some talent, arm talent as well, that may surprise you. And then you're probably going to get a transfer or two that's going to come in and surprise you. You guys that are coming back that in a reliever type role. Just off the top of my head, you've got a Christian Faust. He was only a sophomore this year, I believe. You got Cooper Dossett that could come back.
I think Farady's still
Jake
eligible.
Faraday, I believe. I was about to say, you go down through here, guys that I didn't even.
I know Cody Frank's out of eligibility. I do know that one.
Yeah. You lose Will McIntyre. You hate to see him gone. Ben Bybee, a guy, sophomore that had an okay year. He had struggled his freshman year, came back this year, had decent outings, and late in the year when he was getting some starts, he came in, I think, clutch in keeping us in that Kansas State game. Really came in and ate up some innings for us when we needed that to keep some arms fresh for the potential next few games. We mentioned Colin Fisher. Jake Faraday's a junior, so he can come back. You got Parker Coyle, who's a sophomore this year. Hunter Dietz, I mentioned. Dylan Carter, I'm not sure about it. He's listed as a redshirt junior. He might be a guy that can come back and be kind of an experienced reliever for next year because, I think ultimately, even though he came back and it felt like he was ahead of schedule, never really, I think, fully recovered.
I don't think 100%. He ever got game ready. You know what
I
mean? There's a difference between being healthy and then like game seasoned.
Yeah. And so you've got a lot of options there on guys that can come back and, potentially play a key role in the bullpen next year. And, I looked at the recruiting class for next year. You've got several pitchers coming in that are going to be talented, and it's just the real question with there is, are they going to make it to campus or not? You know, you might have a Gabe Geckel that makes it to campus, and look what he did this year as a freshman. You don't have very many freshmen that are your key closers that you bring in close clutch game situations that can perform like he did. He didn't give up a home run until right there at the end of the year. That's a lot from a freshman.
Almost unheard of, yeah, for somebody to come in and really kind of take over that role almost immediately too. I mean, it wasn't but just a few games into the season that it was like, yep, this guy's our closer, and holy crap, does he have the mentality for it? You know, like it was pretty eye-opening from day one, really, that he was going to kind of be that guy. There wasn't necessarily the need or the space for him on a starting spot or even really in a relieving spot. But that closer role, come in the 8th, 9th inning, sometimes even in the 7th, and chew up a little bit more than you might expect out of him. Man, I mean, it's like he excelled at every single thing you asked of him. I don't remember a bad outing really from Geckel. He had a couple mediocre ones, but man, yeah, he was a bright spot all year long.
I was about saying he comes in, he has an off season to develop, you know, work in that, you know, nice and up to date pitching lab we got. He's only going to get better.
Yeah, that's true. And I think Matt Hobbs is going to do good things with him. That is one person that I do want to commend. It was a tough year where you had some guys struggle with command off and on, but I do think Matt Hobbs, he's got a big hand in putting together the bullpen and this roster overall. He does a lot of the recruiting for the pitching staff, and he knows what he's doing, and it shows. Yeah, at one point in this year, I mean, we easily had the most dominant pitching staff in the country. Had a few pieces kind of falter here and there, and that was tough to see and a little frustrating at times. But overall, Matt Hobbs has a huge, huge hand in why we were as good as we were off and on throughout the year, and why we have some of the arms that actually made it to campus. A lot of folks didn't think Gabe was even going to make it to campus. I think a lot of the reason he's there is Matt Hobbs is there. So that is one person that I think it is key that you keep him. I've heard people complain about Hobbs in previous years, but to me, I don't think the pitching staff was the problem this year. We had some issues down the stretch, but you can't always ask your pitching staff to pitch a shutout every single game just for you to get the win. So the offense has to do some things from time to time as well.
Yeah. So just looking at right here in your recruiting class of about a 19-man signing class, you've got 10 pitchers coming in, at least signed anyway. I say coming in. You got 8 or 10 pitchers signed, 8 right-handers, 2 lefties. You got 9 position players, 4 outfielders, 3 infielders, and a pair of catchers. Yeah, I think catchers, you're losing Parker Rowland and Hudson Polk for sure. Potentially Hudson White, that leaves Ryder Helfrich. So you want to get a couple guys in there that you want at least 2 decent catchers that you can rotate through. And you got to think this high school class that we've got signed is very heavy on Arkansas ties. A lot of Arkansas kids. You know, one guy that I would love to get to campus that I would be very surprised if he does is you'll recognize the last name Carson Wiggins, Jackson's younger brother, that he's one of the top pitchers in the country right now. I think he's the number 1 overall in Oklahoma. And I think I saw earlier today the number, I want to say like 6 or 7 in the country. He's a guy that wouldn't be surprised if he gets drafted pretty high up and
takes the money.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to get guys that when they throw money at you like that it's make it to campus. Another interesting name that we've got committed or signed, Eli Lovich. Ross's little brother.
Lovich boys. Yep.
Yep. I was about to say Ross, the oldest, I believe, transferred over from Missouri. The middle brother, I don't remember his name, plays for Missouri. We played against him this year. And then now you've got little brother Eli that is set to sign with Arkansas. A couple of guys that are in the signing class that are like transfer type guys. You've got a guy that played at Georgia, played at Florida Southwestern State College, that's coming in. Carson Wiggins, like I said, he's Rated as the number 1 overall prospect and number 1 right-handed pitcher in Oklahoma by Perfect Game. Number 4 right-handed pitcher in the class of 2024. So he's a guy that,
Serious
man, if you,
potential.
I was about to say, if you get him on campus, you struck. I want to say you struck gold there. Not saying they always turn out these high potential, but there's the chance that you get him on campus and you've got another, like we kind of had for the most part of this year, one of the top pitching staffs in the country. You look at maybe not necessarily the beginning, first 3-4 weeks, but that middle third of the season, I don't think there was a better pitching
Dominant.
staff out there than Arkansas.
Nah, we were dominant, man. It was a fun ride, even against some really good opponents. Once the competition got a little bit tougher late in the season, when you were playing Kentucky, you were playing Texas A&M, it was a little tough down the stretch there for a couple guys. But overall, though, I mean, what a year. You really got to give a lot of credit to the pitching staff, what Matt Hobbs was able to do and piecing together, the starters, relievers, the closers. I mean, you saw a little bit from everybody. And you saw a decent amount of success from everybody. You had a couple guys, like I said, that got a little bit off their game there at the end of the year, struggling with the command or struggling with, maybe throwing too many strikes over the plate, hanging some breaking balls that kind of cost us dearly, But overall, phenomenal year from a pitching staff standpoint. A little bit of an up and down year from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah. And kind of final thing is I want to talk about before we get out of here is, you look back at the season as a whole, what would you grade or, describe the season? And, yes, we got beat out of our own regional, but I think it's easy to say the season was a success. You win 33 games at home and only lose 3. You win the SEC West for the final year that there are divisions. You come out there and put up a 40-plus win season. Yeah, you ball didn't roll your way in regionals, but at the end of the day, I think that's another successful season under Coach Van Horn. I mean, it's hard to have the consistency that he does year in and year out. Yes, he's struggled in the postseason a little bit here over the past, 3 to 4 years. It's hard to go back and say ever since 2018, it's been frustrating postseason. But I mean, that's the reality of it. And
Baseball, though. I mean,
yeah, it's
so
baseball,
hard.
and you can't judge the success of a program and saying, "Oh, it was a bad year because we got beat out of our regional and didn't make it to Omaha and win the national title." That's just not the case because only one team wins the national title, and that could be a team that you look a few years ago, Ole Miss. They did not have the greatest regular season, but they got hot at the right time and made their run and won. Yeah, they probably weren't expected to do that, but they got
It was
hot.
pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
Well, the thing you got to think about too is that's a prime example of why regular season doesn't necessarily matter. It does as far as a seeding standpoint, and you want to have the opportunity to host your regional and super, if possible, to be one of those top 8 seeds, and that's where the regular season comes into play. So having a good regular season really helps solidify those things, and those are great things to have. Don't get me wrong, they really are. It is a little ironic that the one time that we haven't hosted a regional or a super is over the last 3 years is the one that we actually made it to Omaha and when we went to Oklahoma State and then Chapel Hill. But anyway, I digress on that. It's nice to have fan support, especially when you got to think, we only lost 3 games at home in the regular season. So in the back of your head, hosting is the way to go if possible. It's just sometimes, the stuff doesn't just literally it's 1 or 2 innings here and there that can really get you. Heck, even in game 1 against SEMO, it almost felt like those 2 innings where we gave up 4 runs in each of them back to back, and then they come back and tied the game at 8. It was a little dicey. I mean, let's be real. It was nice that our offense was able to respond and score 8 more runs after that, or 9, I believe. But anyhow, there's innings here and there that can really get you. You got to minimize those, and you got to maximize the ones where you have base runners. That's the biggest thing. I think the biggest takeaway I have from this season is how many runners were left on base. Yeah, you're trying to get those big home run balls to score 3 or 4 of those at a time. And I understand that, especially with some of the hitters up there at the plate that, Stovall goes up there. You're not going to be bunting Stovall in that situation. Totally understand that. You're not going to be bunting Behivo Aloy in that situation. Totally understand that. But you got a couple other guys kind of in there. It's a little bit more questionable. And, maybe you had too many guys that you didn't really trust to put the bunt down that you were wanting to swing away, and it didn't go our way. And you weren't capable or trusting of those small ball scenarios to score 1 or 2 runs when you needed 1 or 2 runs. So we've already talked about it a little bit. Those are some of the things I want to see as far as corrections made or personnel acquired, if you will, for next year, whether it's some of those freshmen coming in are going to fit that bill. But then you really do have to go out, and I think the guys you lose in the transfer portal, you're going to lose some. The guys you lose for out of eligibility, you're obviously going to lose some of them. And the guys you lose to the draft, you're going to lose some of them. You got an opportunity to be maybe a little bit more strategic after learning a few hard lessons over these last 2 years. Be a little bit more strategic maybe on who you go get. Don't just go out there getting the guys that had the highest home run totals last year. That's nice and all. We went out and grabbed a couple of those guys this past year, and it didn't translate to those home runs here at Arkansas. Whether, whatever the case may be is to those reasons, who knows? But, maybe have a different strategy, if you will, on the guys you go after. Pick up a couple big bats. Pick up a couple small bats of guys that can really run the bases. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that as long as their on-base percentages are good. Think about a guy like Ben McLaughlin, for example. If he was fast, think of how many extra runs we could have produced just because you could have had him steal second base. And then instead of him, maybe getting to third base on the next single or something like that, he's scoring in that scenario. And there's a lot of times where McLaughlin or Sprague-Lott or somebody that didn't necessarily run the bases that great got stranded at third because we weren't able to advance them with a steal or a bunt or something like that in the previous out or two. So I don't know. There's a lot of small micro, analyzations of those types of scenarios that you can look at throughout the year that do create a pattern. I think that's something that the coaches know for sure. And how do you break those patterns? So those are a lot of questions that nobody's got all the answers to. And I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about answering them. And that's what makes sports in general so fun. We talk about it in all the sports, not just baseball. There'll be things that you struggle with and things that you're good at. How do you maximize the things you're good at? How do you minimize the things you struggle at? That's really what it boils down to in basically any sport out there. And there's a lot of different ways you can tackle that. So it's going to be a fun ride. Like you said earlier, I really have a lot of faith in Van Horn to make the corrections. He already knows some of the issues. If you go back and watch his press conference, it's obvious that he already understands where some of the corrections need to happen. And then I think some of it's going to be a little bit of trial and error. That's how sports go, especially when you got teams with a lot of different faces on them. There's a lot of trial and error that happens. I think we're going to see that in basketball and football these upcoming years with some of the fresh faces that are there, whether it's coaches or players or both, especially on basketball teams. So I think that the next couple of years in Arkansas athletics, especially in like the big major sports for sure, there's a lot of questions and hope and things like that, which provides, a lot of anticipation and things like that. So it's going to be an interesting year next year, the next 2 years in my mind, in all the sports on where some of these questions get answered, whether it's in good ways or in bad ways. And what the fan support is for some of these coaches, after these next couple of years, because you got a couple of coaches. I don't really think Van Horn's job's in question, but you do got a couple of coaches that you got to look at. Pittman's one of them. Obviously, some of the assistants on the baseball team. I mean, I guess Van Horn, if you want to look at it that way, but I think Calipari is probably the only one that's really got some time, if you will. But there's got to be some questions answered and some improvements made, and you're probably going to digress in some areas, but as long as you show improvement in some areas, I think that's where those beneficial things come from and where people gain trust. And I think that's what a lot of the fans want. I'm sure it's what a lot of the donors want. So I don't know. I'm excited for next year already. Obviously this year left a sour taste, but I think that's one thing we kind of hit on a little bit, and I'll hit it here briefly. The reason that everybody is upset that we lose in regionals is because we make it to regionals every year. A lot of teams don't do that. Let's be real. And a lot of teams aren't national seeds every year. It seems like how we more often than not are. So everybody has these grand and glorious expectations that every year's our year because of the continued success of Dave Van Horn. And so I think Bo Mattingly tweeted it, it puts things into perspective that, the reason you're frustrated right now is because you have these high expectations. And the reason you have these high expectations because the continual delivery of Dave Van Horn. So
I was about to say your floor is making regionals at this
literally,
point with
yeah.
Arkansas. So just making regionals and like the past couple years, we getting beat out.
It
We
feels
hit
like
our
it's not
floor.
enough, but that's more than
Right.
most programs have at this type of consistency. And realistically, that is one of the bigger reasons why a lot of players want to come play for Van Horn. You're going to make it to the postseason and have a chance to shine on the big stages and things like that. Sometimes it doesn't go your team's way. That's baseball, but then a lot of the times it does. So,
And you're held
anyways,
to high standards. I mean,
yeah,
when you come in and get a coach that your expectation for the most part is to make a postseason run in some sort of fashion, and to come in and you see how many pro hogs have come through here, the facilities we have, the number of former Razorbacks that are pros now that come back to work out at Arkansas because we have such great facilities that they have their own lockers here that they can come back and practice and use the facilities in the off season. I mean, it
it's
speaks
unheard
for
of, man.
itself. Yeah.
Yeah, it
And
really is.
so when your consistency level is the floor is for the most part, you make a regional most every year. You have a lot of success, and the number of pros that come out of Arkansas is very high. Why wouldn't you want to come play for Dave Van Horn? And like we said, it's really hard to win a championship, but you got to think the time's coming. I mean, it's hard to say that, but with how great of a coach Dave is, how close we've been in the past, 7-8 years, I think at some point you don't think Dave would retire before getting there. I mean, and there's a chance that happens, but I mean, I think that would be the tip of the cap, or the cherry on top, if you will, for Dave's career as he gets that title and cements himself easily as one of the best college baseball coaches in the country.
Yeah, he already is in my mind one of the best out there, one of the best that's ever done it. I think that is kind of the one check mark that's missing on the resume for him to be in that top 5, top 10 all time, if you will. But to your point, I think he wants to get one. I think we've got potentially 5 to 7 more years before he is in that kind of retirement decision making area. If he gets one in that time frame, I think it's very possible, especially with the talent level he brings in. We're always kind of in the mix. At some point, you hope it goes your way, but at the same time, you got to be realistic that baseball's hard, man. There's a lot of luck involved in baseball when it comes to who makes it out of the. It's the same way as basketball and like the March Madness tournament. Yeah, anybody can win or anybody can lose on any given day. And with that one being, a single elimination, there's all kinds of crazy. That's why it's March Madness. Baseball's not far off from that with the way these regional formats are. Then you got the super regionals. Then once you get to Omaha, you're right back to kind of the funky tournament style, if you will. And it's tough to survive that gauntlet and make it all the way to win the whole thing. But I think really all you can ask out of a high-end coach like that is to get to the postseason every year and give yourself the chance.
I was about to say,
That's really
give
all you can
yourself
ask
a
for.
chance, be in contention. That's all you got to ask for.
The opportunity is really what you're shooting for. And then if you take advantage of the opportunity and win it all, great. But I think from a coach's perspective, that's really where the expectation needs to be that, okay, we have a good enough year. We coach well enough to get to the postseason. The players got to execute is part of it. Let's be real. I don't want to blame players for losses, but at the same time, I mean, there's part of that. Coaches have to set them up for success in the scheming and the strategy and what you're heck, even when it comes down to what you're calling on a pitch or what you're calling on an at bat. But at the same time, you got to have players that execute on top of coaches calling a good game, on top of, luck going your way. I mean, you have so many guys that hit the ball well, but it was straight at somebody or something. So there's a lot of luck involved. But all in all, those opportunities to win it all, Not every team out there has that every year, and I think that's something that fans get spoiled to, myself included, that we are always in the hunt, in the mix, making it to the postseason to have the opportunity to make it all the way. If it falls your way, great. If not, it's tough luck, but that's the way baseball goes. There's a lot of losers out there because not everybody can be the winner.
Yeah, that's very true. So that kind of wraps up our take on this baseball season. We like we opened the show, we hate to see it end like this, quickly. For the most part, for the rest of summer, this will probably be our last Razor recap, as this kind of is, we're hitting the quote unquote our dead period, as far as there's not a ton going on between now and when fall camps start in August. So we'll probably cut back to one show a week, and we'll come up with some nice, interesting content for you guys. If there's something out there you want us to cover, you think it'd make an interesting story or a show, right there below, you can see our info for Twitter or X. You reach out, shoot us what you want to hear. We put this together for you guys. So we'll be back Thursday for our regular show. Probably be a shorter show, as like we said, not much is going on. We'll keep you updated on as far as transfer portal recruiting, as kind of basketball. That part is wrapping up, but we still got a piece or two to fill for basketball. And then things are going to start getting active for baseball with the season kind of coming to close for Arkansas. Some other teams are going to see guys start getting in the portal and things of that nature. And then we'll see what happens. And, keep on lookout. Keep your calendar clear. End of June 29th, we're planning another live show. We'll give you some more details as we get those logistically figured out, but it'll be another good time. And, at the end of the day, you got to love Arkansas for Arkansas. Go Hogs. And,
tough to be a Razorback fan sometimes, man, but you got to take the wins with the losses.
That's very true. So until Thursday, we'll catch you later.